Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this discussion around a cybersecurity framework fit for global use, the NIS Cybersecurity Framework 2.0. And a big thank you to NIS for co-hosting this event with the Coalition to Reduce Cyber Risk. My name is Alex Botting. I'm Service Coordinator for the Coalition to Reduce Cyber Risk, or CR2, as we'll refer to it for shorthand. This is part of a sort of collaboration that we've had with NIST over a year or two now. And we wanted to bring together today international stakeholders to discuss the recently released draft of the CSF 2.0, I believe released about 2 weeks ago now, Kevin, give or take. There we go. So the CSF's obviously been a critical tool for organizations managing risk globally across borders. And we want to make sure that international governments and industry understand how it can be used to this effect, but more importantly, to ensure that they provide input into the update to the CSF to ensure that it is fit for purpose, both in a US context and beyond a US context. To that end, we welcome you today. We encourage you to be active in the discussion. We have a Q&A function that you'll see at the bottom of the page that will enable you to send questions over to panelists as we go along. Send them as they pop into your head. We can either answer them back via text, or we can get to them in the Q&A section and answer them verbally. But beyond that, there is an open consultation that NIST is running. They also have another workshop next week, I believe, on the 19th, which you can join virtually, if not in person. And we really do encourage you to use those opportunities to help shape the 2.0 version of the framework. My final point is that the CSF 1.0 and 1.1 are a fantastic tool that we know many companies of different sizes, different locations, different sectors utilize, as well as governments incorporating them. And that is due to a lot of hard work that has come out of NIST over the years, and a lot of collaboration. So beyond the utility of the tool itself, a huge congratulations to NIST for having convened such an effective public-private partnership, and ultimately turned out such an effective tool for cybersecurity risk management. With that said, I will turn over to Kevin Stein, who is Chief of NIST's Applied Cybersecurity Division. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you so much, Alex. Really appreciate it. And good day to everyone. As Alex just mentioned, I'm Kevin Stein. I'm NIST Chief Cybersecurity Advisor, and I also lead our Applied Cybersecurity Division. We really appreciate the chance to continue co-hosting the cybersecurity risk management series with the coalition. It has been a journey, as Alex kind of indicated, certainly for us and many of you, I know, over the last, 10 plus years since we started with the drafting of the initial cybersecurity framework. And we've learned just a tremendous amount through your experiences, through our stakeholder engagements that have helped to inform and continue to make the cybersecurity framework a valuable tool for companies and other organizations of all shapes and sizes, and even other nations. So it's very gratifying, and we appreciate your support. These webinars, like all stakeholder engagement, have presented a great opportunity for us to discuss important topics, particularly as we're moving towards or forward in the process to update the cybersecurity framework, or the CSF, to version 2.0 right now. So today you're going to hear a little bit more from NIST, my colleague Amy Mon, about where we've been and where we're headed in the process of updating the CSF to version 2.0. You're also going to hear some perspectives from some international partners on their use and experience of the CSF as well. We've been collecting stakeholder feedback during this entire process, and hearing about international approaches has been particularly important to us so that we can continue improving the CSF as a risk management tool that can be used throughout the world. We've been thrilled to date with the international uptake of the CSF since it was first released back in 2014. We continue to identify and learn about new adaptations and translations with over 10 direct translations on our International Cybersecurity and Privacy Resources page. Happy to say we're soon going to be adding a Norwegian translation to that body of resource as well. So, and I think we'll hear a little bit more about that today. You're also going to hear about some of those resources and how we're continuing our international engagement efforts throughout the process of updating to CSF 2.0. Events like this help keep these conversations going. And if you have further questions about international use of the CSF, please feel free to reach out to us. We're eager to have more conversations with you to understand your challenges and how we can ensure that the CSF continues to be a tool that's going to be valuable for you. So as you're going to hear later in the program, we have put out draft CSF 2.0 that is still open for public comment through November 4th. You're going to hear about some of the significant changes that have been made as a result of the public feedback, and we hope you'll take a look and provide some comments if you haven't already. We find those very valuable, so we're looking forward to your feedback for sure. As Alex mentioned, we are hosting our final workshop on CSF 2.0 next week on September 19th and 20th. The in-person participation for September 20th is already closed, but please do join us virtually on the 19th and hear from experts about the proposed changes, really their experiences with the CSF that will help get us to final version of 2.0. And we're happy to provide the link to register a little bit later. So again, in closing, thanks again to all for your attendance today, and thank you to our speakers for sharing your perspectives. And again, a hearty thanks to Alex and team at the Coalition for your continued support and engagement with us. We really appreciate that. And we look forward to hearing today's discussions and continuing to engage with everyone on CSF 2.0 update. So thanks again, and Alex, back over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. Invite Amy to come on screen now, and we will turn over to you for your presentation on the updates to 2.0.
Thanks so much, Alex, and morning and good afternoon to everybody. My name's Amy Mon, and for Kevin in the Applied Cybersecurity Division at NIST, and my chief role is to help with our international engagement on things like our cybersecurity framework and our other various cybersecurity and privacy resources. I'm very excited to be part of today's discussion and can really thank Alex and the team for having us and continuing to partner with us on having these types of discussions. As Kevin noted, it's very important for us to get international feedback and continue working with stakeholders as we update the framework to version 2.0. I'm going to show a few slides today and talk about our journey so far and ways to continue to engage as we move towards the final version of 2.0 that we will be releasing next year. The Cybersecurity Framework, which many may already be familiar with, but it's a cybersecurity risk management tool first put out back in 2014 after NIST worked very closely, not just with government, but with industry and academia and international partners to develop flexible guidance for managing risks across organizations of all sizes and types of critical infrastructure sectors. The first version and subsequent version 1.1 that's available now consists of 5 different functions that you'll see listed on the screen there. And these span the entire breadth of cybersecurity risk management from a preventive to a reactive phase. Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And there are various categories and subcategories under these functions that are controls and actions to help achieve those functions. And those are all consistent with and aligned with current international standards that people are already using to manage cybersecurity risks, like ISO 27001 or ISO 62443, NIST ONA Special Publication 853 Security Controls. So the framework is very rooted in international standards and really reflects public feedback of what's most important in terms of identifying and managing cybersecurity risk. We heard this was a very common and easy to understand language for people of varying levels of cybersecurity risk management and expertise, and applies really to not just information technology, but various technologies and these sectors. So we have updated it once back in April of 2018, and version 1.1 does reflect feedback and improvements in areas that we heard from stakeholders were important to incorporate, like an increased focus on supply chain risk management, coordinated vulnerability disclosure, and other areas. So we have made some of those changes that are really reflected in version 1.1. But as we'll see in some later slides, we had heard from our stakeholders that the time was right after about 5 years and lots of changes in the cybersecurity risk management landscape and technology to move to version 2.0. With the current version 1.1 that's currently available, just to put a quick note there, as our White House released our national cybersecurity strategy this past spring, which even references the cybersecurity framework as an important risk management tool, along with others developed by our fellow government agencies. Currently, our U.S. government does have to use the cybersecurity framework and NIS developed standards and guidance, and it's currently voluntary for our industry. But we have seen a lot of use and uptake, particularly as our partners have been very involved in the development of these resources like the framework, making it easier for them to use. And I also wanted to note and talk a little bit about the international uptake, which Kevin said has been very exciting for us to see. And we want to continue making the framework something that's useful, not just in the US, but throughout the world. When the first version of the framework came out in 2014, Japan was one of the first to use and adapt it, and they continue to use it in national policy and particularly within their communications sector. They were also the first to directly translate, and as Kevin noted, we have over 10 translations available on our cybersecurity and privacy international resource site that's listed down there. We now have it available in Spanish and Portuguese, Arabic, recently released Greek and Malay versions, and as Kevin noted, we're excited to be working to make the Norwegian translation available as well. As we've seen different translations come from our partners, we work with them to help check and put them up on this website to make them more broadly available as a resource. And we're very excited to continue that process and make it even easier for our friends throughout the world to use and access the framework. Other different adaptations we've seen have included from Israel, who put it in their cyber defense methodology and adapted it more for a specific sector use. Ireland, who is used and adapted it into meeting requirements for the Network Information Security Directive, and we'll be hearing about other ways partners have used it in that manner as well. And I've listed Uruguay as well, who are on their 4th version of the framework and have been great partners in sharing their use cases and how they've adapted it. So really it's been seen not just in one particular region or particular area, but many different use cases throughout the world. And it's been very important for us to learn about these approaches and people's successes and challenges with adopting and using the framework, which will really help us in improving version 2.0. And it's also been important for us working with our international partners in the standards development organizations as well, such as ISO. We've worked with partners there on a couple of documents that are now available. I'm sorry I haven't listed them here, but there's both a technical reference document and a technical specification that have language from first versions of the framework and have been modified and adapted through the open, transparent standards development process to be resources that are also available as a risk management tool that don't say U.S. government or NIST, but in tools that we're excited to be able to promote and have worked closely with our industry partners on. I'm very grateful for being able to work with the coalition and others to help share these resources and have conversations like this. We participate in a number of different international events where we share information on the framework and learn about other use cases, and have been continuing to do that throughout the 2.0 update process. Last year in February, we issued a request for information where it's noted since we had last updated the framework in 2018, we wanted to check and see if now was a good time to try to update and continue making the framework useful as a risk management tool. We did hear resoundingly that while the framework is helpful, there have been so many changes that it would be a good time to shift towards a 2.0 version to better incorporate all these changes in technology in the risk management landscape. We were thrilled to get a lot of different comments and feedback that we were able to analyze and put out, see where the different areas were that stakeholders wanted us to change and update within the framework. I saw a number of different areas, such as continuing this international engagement and alignment with international standards like ISO, to incorporate even more changes and bring out the supply chain risk management element, have a focus on measurement and metrics, and even adding and looking towards new areas and governing and even expanding and adding a new function. So a lot of great significant changes that we've been working on with our partners. First through a workshop last August where we had over 4,000 virtual attendees coming from 100 countries. And we've had a second workshop since then after we gathered that feedback, put out an analysis of what we've been hearing. And last February, we had a virtual or a hybrid version of a workshop and some smaller in-person breakout sections to really dive deeper into some of these proposed topics and really continue getting that feedback from government and industry throughout the world. We publish various papers that people have been able to comment on and let us know if we're going in the right direction, and really incorporating all of this feedback in the way that people would like to see to make the framework more useful. And Evan had noted, we had just put out a draft, and earlier this year we had released the core, those functions that you've seen in the new govern one. And based off of that, put out the full version that's still available for public comment until November 4th. We've also added what we call new implementation examples to help people even further have guidance and ways to use and adapt the framework. So we're very much looking forward to the feedback we receive on those. As Alex and Kevin mentioned, we're excited that next week is our final workshop. And as the in-person things unfortunately have been closed, we really do welcome everyone to join us virtually on the 19th. We'll have a series of panelists, and throughout this whole process, we've been making sure to be very inclusive and having perspectives from throughout the world to really start looking more at these topics and get us over the finish line to version 2.0. So we're excited to have that workshop, and then we'll continue finalizing that draft to either release the final version of 2.0 early next year. Some of the key changes I've already been mentioning, especially a focus increasing on supply chain risk management and ways that we can better integrate and use the cybersecurity framework with the number of other very helpful NIST resources we've developed with a public collaboration, including our privacy framework, which is very similar in structure as a privacy risk management tool with functions and categories to help manage risk from a privacy perspective. Our NIS workforce framework, which has a focus on developing a cybersecurity workforce, our secure software development framework, and others. So really including some language to help people see how interoperable these frameworks can be and be better used and leveraged with each other. Included more implementation guidance, and something we continuously heard was the importance of making sure the framework is easier to use for small and medium-sized businesses and different sectors. We have been thrilled to see a number of different profiles that have been developed throughout industry and at our own National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, or NCCOE. So a number of profiles in different areas like ransomware or critical manufacturing. U.S. Coast Guard helped develop one. So really looking through these and seeing how we can better leverage and provide guidance on developing profiles and really leveraging the framework while still keeping it flexible and easy for anybody to use. We've also expanded the scope, as remember the first title for the framework was Framework for Improving Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure, but shortening to just be the NIST Cybersecurity Framework as many know it. Again, one of the biggest changes is adding that 6th function that you'll now see in the updated wheel there. We still have the original 5 functions, but have pulled out some of the category language and developed some new content in a govern function that now touches on all of those and really increases focus on an overall risk management strategy and processes within an organization. So very excited to get feedback and better leverage having this new function, as we've seen in some other example profiles. So that's now available, and you'll see that in the draft that's out for comment, and that'll be a focus of one of our panels on the workshop next week. So this is just a small presentation, but excited to have a lot of these changes and continue hearing from stakeholders about additional ways to improve the draft, show ways for measuring and having metrics for success while still keeping the framework flexible, ways we can continue improving that alignment to international standards. We do have an online informative reference program and a newly developed cyber and privacy resource tool that can help people use the framework along with other NIST developed resources, or better find mappings or ways that people have already developed things to show how the framework can be used with other existing guidance or standards and help us keep up as standards are revised and new ones developed. But always welcoming more feedback on how we can improve that process and can keep up and show how the framework can be used and aligned with international standards. Gives us an example where, besides the draft that I mentioned, we have these new implementation examples that are, again, hopefully going to be very helpful for stakeholders in using and implementing the framework, and having some starting points and examples to implement some of these updated categories and subcategories. So this is also available for comment through November 4th. As a reminder, all of our feedback will be publicly posted, and people can even go in now and see what people have been saying about previous drafts and some of our previous analysis papers that have been put out for comment. So all of this will be helpful, and we really do look at everything and try to adjudicate and take into account. So again, really appreciate everyone taking time to go through these drafts, and hopefully have time to come and see what some of our speakers have to say about it next week as well. the ways that we want to continue to engage, besides events like today, where it's very important for us to hear what others have to say and learn about new approaches and examples. We always welcome any resources people would like to share with us. Noted those adaptations and translations that we make available on our international site. If there's some that we've missed or ones you'd like to bring to our attention, we're very happy to work with you and find ways to make that available on our site and share with others. Or if there's other tools you have or ways you've adapted or used the framework that would be helpful to share with people to help with their use, we're always happy to look into posting that as well. We continue to invite mappings or other resources to put into our online informative reference program. We have a number available already, but there's new guidance being developed all the time or updated, and really appreciate our partners' help in showing how the framework can be mapped to or used and be complementary to existing guidance. I noted briefly that we've seen a lot of profiles and worked with industry to develop some even within our own National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. But if you're aware of a profile or would like to share it as an example that could be helpful to others, we do post those as resources on our CSF site as well. We also note a number of success stories when people want to voluntarily share how they've adapted the framework and what steps they took and how it's brought some value to their organization. So always happy to highlight those on our site as well, or through events like this where we can hear from partners and in our workshop next week. And also hearing ways that people are using the framework to measure and assess their own cybersecurity program. So all of this feedback, again, will be really helpful to us over the next coming months. And even after the documents close for comment on November 4th, we'll still be having these types of discussions and working with people till the very end next year before we put out version 2.0. Here's just some links here, and we'll make sure to share this presentation afterwards as well. But if you've missed our first two workshops, you can see what people had to say in the online recordings there. And even next week, we'll be live streaming, but we'll make those panels available publicly as well after the event. We have the drafts that are available on our website for the comment, and you can see what others have said in the past about previous versions. And you can take a look at our international site and our resources. And if you have something you'd like to add, we're always very happy to hear about that. There's our distro down there, and I'll provide my email as well. Always happy to have these types of conversations or follow up if there's questions you have or things you'd like to bring up that we don't have time to get to today. So with that, I want to again thank everybody so much for your time, and to Alex and the team for having us here today. Really looking forward to hearing what our great speakers have to say today and answering any questions later. Thanks so much, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amy. And please do, if you've got any questions for Amy, put those in the Q&A function, and we can circle back on them during the Q&A. And I would also say, NIST, probably more than any agency we've worked with around the world, really does both encourage interaction and also closely monitors the feedback that they get. So it is certainly a good use of your time to engage with them and provide them with feedback as you can. Moving forward in the agenda, we have our International Government Perspectives panel, and for that I'd invite Per Jacobsen and Martin Svein. Excellent. So Per is Senior Advisor in the Norwegian Agency for Public and Financial Management, and Martin is Head of Private Sector Regulation Unit in NUKIB, which is the Czech National Cyber and Information Security Agency. Welcome to you both. I think how we'll do this is give each of you sort of 5 minutes for some opening remarks, setting the scene of your experiences, and then we can do a little bit of a moderated Q&A for the next 15 minutes. If that works for you both, Per, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for having me. Yes, I'm working for the Norwegian Agency for Public and Financial Management, and more specific, the public cloud marketplace within cybersecurity. This is a procurement body of the Norwegian government, and we have at least 3 initiatives that I think might be interesting for NIS as we are using NIS. One of the things the we have established a portfolio of cloud contracts with tools and services within cybersecurity that all public entities can adopt to their own procurement. Tools and services need to meet the security requirements from NIST and more. If you like, I can tell a little bit more about that after. The second one I want to mention is that we have also established a baseline of security reference architecture that all public entities can use for procurement cloud tools and services. This baseline includes requirements to relevant standards as NIST, ISO, Cloud Security Alliance, and more. And related to contracts which are to be negotiated with global companies, we see that NIST is the preferred framework because of the adoption in big tech companies. We are about now to make some big contracts and negotiations with the big tech companies within SIPS era. And also,
Per, are you sharing slides with us? It's not showing up on the screen. Okay, perfect. Just wanted to double check that.
Right. And also by making NIST available in local language, in Norwegian, NIST framework come closer, we think, to users in various positions within the entity, and therefore can be a nice tool to spread knowledge as well as being more accessible. And this is also part of what we are working with for public entities. So right now at our website, we are publishing the Norwegian translation as Tor Ståle Hansen in Norway have done, and we enjoy that, and we will see how we can go further with that as well. I don't know if that's okay for my opening remarks. I do have some slides I could show also quickly to give you an overview of what we are doing. If that's okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I'll just share my screen now. 2 seconds. Let's see. You can see my screen now?
Not yet.
Should be.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So this is the products we are talking about, which is the portfolio we would like to present for the Norwegian public entities. And we have split this into 3 phases, where we start with basic management and control, and phase 2 is build products, services, and phase 3 is manage services. We think that this is a way to go forward, and starting with cyber risk score as the first tool. We did a project last year to find out if this was useful for Norwegian entities, and so we are now going forward to make a cloud contract which can be used for all public entities in government and municipalities in Norway. And of course, all of these tools should be cloud-based. They should be automated, situational awareness. We would like tools to be available to high-level functions within the government, and we also want it to meet the baseline criteria, which should always be NIST and the more localized NSM, which is kind of built on the NIST and ISO standards. in addition, we are working with the cybersecurity and data protection reference architecture for NPS, where we try to make the contracts, the cloud contracts, say a little bit better for the government entities as they would have been if they are going by themselves, because we can negotiate with about 900,000 users now back, and so we have the force of negotiation when it comes to that. So these frameworks are also built on NIST CSF, and it's based on other recognized standards, and of course the industry best practices and reference contracts, which we have already done with the Norwegian public sector. So I think this is the scope we are working at right now, and presented in just a few slides. So I'll stop sharing now and put the mic forward to Martin.
Excellent. Thanks, Per. Over to you, Martin. Oh, we cannot hear you at the moment, Martin. It's not coming through. No.
And now?
There we go. That's better.
I'm sorry for that. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the word. Thank you for inviting me here for such a discussion. And also thank you, Per, for your presentation you had. As was already said, same here in the Czech Republic. I'm from the Czech National Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency. Our experience with the NIST is that we use it as a source of information since the beginning, since the NIS one in 2014. It's a great inspiration for our security measures that are given to our obliged entities according to the Czech Act on cybersecurity. And that's the thing. That's our connection to NIST. And even if our environment here in the center of Europe is really strongly connected to the ISO 27001 norm and standard, we still are using NIST as a source of valuable information and as a source for our security measures. So this is the introduction for me. If you have any questions, you or the participants, feel free to ask me anytime.
Excellent. Thanks, Martin. And I'll start with you. So you recently had your own 2.0 update in the EU, which was the NIS Directive 2.0. And part of the objective of that was to ensure possibly a higher baseline of security for critical infrastructure in the EU, but also to ensure that there's some level of consistency across the EU and preserving that digital single market idea. How do you find, or rather, how are you leveraging international standards and frameworks in that context to help critical infrastructure providers have a consistent approach that they can deploy across the union? And I guess more generally, how is your national level transposition of 2.0 going?
Thank you for this question. I'll start from the second question. In case of implementation of the NIS2 directive, I would like to point out that the Czech Republic started the project really early because we had to start in February 2022. So from my perspective, we are one of the first EU member states which start some actions or some procedures about the NIS2 directive. It was long before it was finished. And it was because there were such changes introduced by the NIS2 directive that completely changed the philosophical approach to the regulation in Czech Republic, in our state. And we had to prepare not an amendment of an existing Czech Act on cybersecurity, which we had since 2015, but we had to start to build a completely new act, and therefore we had to start very, very early. And this proposal of the act has been drafted, is published, and it's currently at the beginning of the legislative procedure. So we will see how it will go and we will end up. Our aim is to meet the transposition deadline, which is same for all EU member states, and it is October 2024. On the issues of security measures that are connected to the NIST, we are talking about Article 2021 of the NIS2 Directive. And the establishment of security measures is building, in our case, on the current legislation. As I mentioned, we have the Czech Act on Cybersecurity since 2015. And in the same way as the new one is prepared, the old one is also based on international standards in question of security measures. Also, as I mentioned already, unfortunately, from our perspective here, the Central Europe is built on the ISO 27001 standard environment. And therefore, this standard is the main inspiration, but NIST is not left behind because it's such a great inspiration also for some to make the security measures like comprehend set of criteria. And that's the thing that we have in the current and even in the prepared future act, that we are trying to take everything that was invented already and put it on one place, take the best from it, and create security measures as much as they fulfill the goal of making it the best practice, as we can say, best practice in the Czech Republic.
And I was going to say, we love 27001 as well. I don't, we love all of our children equally.
Yeah, precisely. And we have the same point of view.
And actually, I think they interact very well, right? Most of the companies we work with are using both, and they fulfill specific needs within their risk management processes. Related to that, Per, you talked there about the use of the CSF as well as other international standards for procurement, which is an interesting use case. It's not the first time we've seen it, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's the most common use case for the CSF either. Are you seeing most companies that are coming to you are already using the framework, or is this something that's kind of new to many companies in Norway or many of the companies you're working with? What's the level of adoption you're seeing in the private sector in your part of the world?
The thing is that in Norway, the Norwegian Security Agency, they do have their own subset, I would call it, from NIST. So in a way, many Norwegian entities do use that subset, but I think now when we have made this available in Norwegian on our site, I think it will increase the interest for using full sets from NIST. It's the version 1.1 which is on our sites, but hopefully we can have version 2 as well in a while. We don't really force any of the entities to use any of these standards, but we encourage to use the NIST when negotiating with international global companies. Yeah, that's our position right now.
That makes sense. And so in many ways, you're kind of giving a basket of these are the most globally utilized, globally respected frameworks or standards that you should be looking at. That's interesting, and it's certainly something we've heard from a number of the companies we work with, is that contractual piece of things. One of the things we often try to emphasize, in fact, in the trade domain is governments adopting 27001 or the CSF, or some global standards and widely utilized frameworks, actually is very helpful from a supply chain perspective for your companies, because if X big corporation requires you be 27001 certified in order to be part of their digital supply chain, then having encouraged your domestic companies to do that makes them more easily able to sell into global markets and to benefit from those supply chains. So that makes absolute sense. You mentioned, both of you, looking forward to the CSF 2.0. What, if anything, would you be looking to see in terms of updates that would either reinforce the positive role that the CSF's played to date, or perhaps make it even more applicable to your circumstances?
Yeah, would you ask? Well, from my point of view, we are looking into, of course, the new NIST 2.0 version. The govern part is interesting in our case to have a closer look at. Not sure really how we're going to use it and how we're going to implement in the contracts, but I think we will have a closer look at it. But we are it's a bit too early for us to conclude and say more.
Excellent. Martin?
Yes, from my perspective, it's the same. But I also discussed that thing earlier with my colleagues that like really working with the cybersecurity measures, and they said also that that the draft promised a tool designed to help the matter related to the core. And such tool would keep up to date and contain the relevant information to core and updatable informative reference of cybersecurity standards, and it would be a great source of cybersecurity knowledge, even if the NIST itself is also the one. So these are just the comments from me and our side here in Czech Republic, from our perspective on the draft of the NIST.
Excellent. Well, I did want to thank you both for those perspectives. It's so useful for us to hear about the utility in different parts of the world, different environments. And would encourage you both to stay on as well, so that we can, I'm seeing some questions coming into the Q&A function, so we'll send some of those your way towards the end of the program. Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Now we will turn to the international industry perspectives panel. So invite Mansur and Kevin to come on camera. Mansur Abel Kazimov is VP for Cybersecurity Governance and Deputy CISO at Schneider Electric, and Kevin Gronberg is Director for Technology Risk at MasterCard. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
I think similar to the previous panel, I think we'll give you each a few minutes for opening remarks and then get into a moderator Q&A. And Mansour, I think you've got a couple of slides you wanted to share with us, which would be instructive about Schneider's approach.
Absolutely. So let me share my screen just to check. Can you see my screen?
Looks good.
Okay, very good. First of all, Alex and Cybersecurity Coalition and NIS, thanks for having me and giving the opportunity to share what we do exactly and tangibly about the NIS CSF framework. First of all, about myself. So I run cybersecurity and product security strategy at Schneider Electric. I've been with the company for about 8 years now, after a long career of management consulting. So a little bit of Schneider, a little bit about Schneider Electric. Schneider Electric provides energy and automation in 5 continents. So 34 billion company with about 130,000 employees across the world, more or less. Revenue equally distributed between North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific, and the rest of the world. Yes, it's a France-based company, but it's not a French company. It's a truly global multinational with very complex operations, R&D, factories, distribution centers, staging areas, and a long and very vast footprint of partners, suppliers, and very complex go-to market. So about NIST. So we have gone through this discussion about different frameworks and different approach when it comes to articulating and structuring the cyber program in the beginning. So it was, I think, just after the implementation of the 1.0 of NIS CSF framework in 2014, as Amy was mentioning, and we have a kind of adopted this framework without any kind of a discussion for several reasons, because it was a kind of appealing to the management storytelling, which is not a little deal in a big company where you need to drive management attention with a simple, let's say, narrative, without going into different normative or standard or product, let's say, standard discussion. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to throw away other frameworks, as you rightfully said, Alex, in your comment with Martin. So these standards have different functions and objectives. So you have to combine at some moment at different, let's say, for different audiences and for different scopes, right? So we have taken this framework and adapted into the company's operations, so that the big cyber program is articulated in such a way that it gives the unique understanding to any stakeholder which we were meeting, internal or external. In the identify phase, essentially the risk identification and threat identification discussion. In the product, we have the protection piece with all the policies, technology stack, etc. that allows us to protect the company, but not only technology stack, because it's also about influencing an action prioritization internally and externally, as I said before. Monitoring, which is an important piece with our SOCs, and reality checks and different audits and controls and penetration testing, be it cyber or product level. Then the response, which is the big let's say element. Essentially, it's incident response and SOC threat intelligence and insider trust capabilities that we have. And lastly, the recover piece, which is the BCP, DRP, and the resilience piece, which has become a big topic recently. So this is how we have adapted into the internal, let's say, framework. But this doesn't give you it's a kind of theoretical thing. If I want to be more concrete into how we kind of operationalized it, so we had to translate the NIST framework into concrete risks by dividing the company into the risk areas, not on the organizational belonging to that or this entity. It's more on the risk scenario, because organizations change. They are agile. They try to adapt to external and internal realities. So one organization can be another organization tomorrow. So we have based the risk scenarios that you can see on the scenario column, R1, R2, R3. So R stands for risk, basically across 4 risks that we have: damage to customer, business disruption, compliance, and IP. Rather classical, but the scenarios are different depending on the strategy of the company. If R1, I'm making things up because it's a confidential scenario. If the company wants to grow services business 2 times faster than the rest of the group, this becomes a scenario. So R1 could become a kind of a services people causing a damage at a customer side, right? And then there will be an ExCom member who will be responsible for this risk, and we want to evaluate this risk on the maturity level of NIST, which is from 1 to 4, as you know, 1 being partial and 4 being adaptive, right? And then we want to identify a key risk indicator through the analysis. Is it a kind of a maturity model or something else? That was very much a kind of subject to discussion at that time. So we came to an understanding that, okay, this is not enough. Let's say to do that, it's a kind of a very theoretical. So let's add 1 layer to this risk register, which has become the so-called kill chain of Lockheed Martin. Basically, we have combined NIST maturity model through a Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain to identify, let's say, the controls or the maturity of the controls across the kill chain by imagining 2-3 scenarios for each one of the 2-3 attack paths for each one of the scenarios. And we have called upon an external company, a third-party independent company, to do the assessment once in a year across the 15 scenarios that we have, right? So that gave us a kind of this risk evaluation. You can see previous and current that we update every year, and this has become our talking point, our narrative with the top management and with our business leaders at the middle management. So this is more tangible, and this is more kind of appealing and to the business and operations, making it kind of more concrete. And on the recent changes and adaptations being made to the NIST framework, so the future NIST 2.0, Schneider Electric has supported and is supportive of all the major changes, and we have given our formal feedback. And the creation of the governance function has been a kind of music to our ears, if I may so. For the simple reason that the governance function was always there implicitly. So now explicitly seeing it on the framework, it is very very positive. Not that I'm in charge of the cybersecurity strategy and governance, and it's kind of giving an additional mandate, etc. It's just creating a frame for the outcomes, the governance outcomes that need to be achieved through this complex, let's say, wheel, which can be sometimes executed by different parts of the company, especially for a very big company like Schneider Electric. And moving from only critical infrastructure focus to all sectors, that is also a very positive movement in our opinion, and also supply chain security, which is now taken into account more and more in this, on top of the supply chain security framework of NIST, which complements. That is also very, very positive in my opinion. So that'll be my contribution to this. Alex, so back to you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mansoor. I think that's a great sort of insight into how you take on how you set cybersecurity risk within broader business risk, but also the clear, I guess, borderless nature of the process, right? Some of those scenarios that you're talking about. Kevin, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. So my name is Kevin Gronberg. I'm Director of Technology Risk at MasterCard. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak about how we view the framework. A little bit on me. I've been with MasterCard for a bit over a year, but I've been involved with the framework in various capacities since the beginning, and especially in the financial services industry. MasterCard is a big supporter of the financial services profile of the framework, which is put together and is managed by the Cyber Risk Institute. Full disclosure, we're actually a board member of the Cyber Risk Institute, so we are all in on that utilization of the framework in that profile for this specific to the financial services sector. As such, we are very excited about the addition of the govern function in the framework because of the added utility that we believe the govern function brings. The 5 functions are a great way of getting your arms around what a cybersecurity program should include. And we believe the governance function just adds to the ability for an organization to perpetuate that program. So it's the 5 functions build that program. Governance allows it to perpetuate and to improve over time. Because without that oversight, you're essentially just putting pieces in place and hoping that they do what they're supposed to do. And we have found that putting a real emphasis on our governance within the program has increased our visibility and the effectiveness of our controls all the way up and down through the organization, from the actual implementation to the executive committee and above, as well as with additional stakeholders both inside and outside the organization. We're pleased that NIST and its stakeholders have proposed to include this 6th function within the framework. Also thanking Amy and her team for as well as all the work that Kevin Stein has done over the years, just incredible work. But including and expanding that supply chain function, from a user of the CRI profile, which for some of you on the presentation may not be familiar with the CRI profile. And this, I know this isn't I'm not trying to sell the profile, but just to kind of
it's a great profile. Sell away.
Well, just to level set everybody, the profile was an effort by the financial service industries to take the framework and to connect it with all of the various regulatory requirements that the financial services regulators have articulated both in the United States and globally. And so in a way to try to connect the dots, we included not just a category and subcategory, but actually a diagnostic statement, which gives a little bit more granularity as to what the category and subcategory are trying to do within the organization according to what the regulators are expecting. So it gives that ultimately a little bit more granularity to how the program can be put together. Then on top of that, we added a workbook, which provides evidence expectations. Now, it's important to realize that we did this because we are in a very compliance-related industry, right? So this is something that we operate on an everyday basis. And so it was really important for us to be able to, and it's actually been a great usage of the framework, to be able to use similar words, similar vocabulary that everybody is using, so that we can talk about similar concepts. And so the addition of the govern function within the framework is going to go a long way in getting everybody on the same page and perpetuating the excellence of the programs upon which they were built on the previous 5 domains. So we are, with regard to our international view of the framework, we've been very heartened that we've seen international partners using the framework. The NIS framework is a well-known entity around the world, both for just international governments as well as international regulators. Again, I'm going to focus on regulators because we're a financial services company. So just don't take that as a promotion or I'm not endorsing the compliance aspect of it, but it's just an everyday situation for our industry. One of the issues that we have found is the framework has been created as a tool to improve and enable a good cybersecurity program, not to regulate a cybersecurity program. And so we found that sometimes that understanding of the origins of the framework and the way the framework is constructed does not itself lead to a good compliance environment, which is why, to be honest with you, we in the financial services, we created the profile. We took that extra step. We added that extra layer of connective tissue between the profile, or between the framework and the regulations. Trying to put a regulatory lens directly on top of the framework it's not the smoothest of transitions. And so we've encountered that around the world. Sometimes governments are just saying, okay, just be compliant with the NIST framework. And as we know on the phone, the framework is not designed to be in compliance with or not in compliance with. It is a framework for developing a program. It points you to the informative references of international standards such as ISO, COBIT, COSO, etc. And that is where you find how to be compliant. So having a government entity say you need to be compliant with the framework kind of I believe they're misunderstanding how the framework is designed to be used. And so I think there's a little bit of work and education and consultation that we can get to. Bottom line, though, is even with these small misunderstandings, and that's all they are, small misunderstandings, the internationalization of the framework has gone a long, long way in getting everyone on the same page, having everyone discuss the same concepts the same way. Because 20 years ago, you get 20 cybersecurity engineers in a room and ask them for a definition, and you get 20 different definitions of what that was. Now we're down to probably about 8 or 9 different definitions, but the bottom, it's progress. and we should see it as progress. And we are building more solid, more sustainable cybersecurity programs throughout the world because of the framework, and for that we're extremely thankful. Oh, Alex, you might be on mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Just another plug for the financial sector profile. If folks haven't seen, Josh Magri over at CRI has a fantastic slide that connects all of the different regulations around the world into the framework that they've pulled together for the profile, and it's truly remarkable to see the breadth and complexity of regulation that a global financial organization has to comply with. They've done a fantastic job there of pulling that into one place. And I do want to drill down on that point you made there, Kevin, about the connection between the framework and potentially regulation, because I think it's an important one. The framework's almost if you think of an interview, asking open-ended questions in order to guide people towards the right answers versus a yes/no survey, which is what regulation is typically looking to do, right? So it's not necessarily that the framework's not doing something important from a cybersecurity perspective. We all know that it is, but it is enabling it to be more tailored to all sectors and circumstances, precisely because it is that open-ended process as opposed to a simple, do you have this control in place, which may or may not be applicable.
Well said. Very well said, Alex. I mean, that's it exactly. And so trying to, and it's because it's designed that way specifically, right? The NIST and its stakeholders did a great job in creating the framework as a tool to guide the development of a effective cybersecurity program, not to lay out the requirements of that shall be met. And so, and that's why I meant on these governments that are maybe saying comply with the framework and you're good. There's a slight misunderstanding of just the design and the function of the framework. And if you want to go down that compliance road, you can get there, but you need to take an extra step, and you need to articulate how that compliance needs to look rather than just saying comply with the framework, because it's not designed that way.
Mansoor, I want to jump over to your sector. How do you see a lot of adoption among Schneider's competitors and amongst companies within your supply chain of the framework? Has it been truly internationalized in that way yet, or are you still finding that there's a lot of education that needs to go along with that?
Excellent question. Through our, let's say, peer-to-peer discussions with our CISO colleagues, with our product security officers in different CISO forums, in the authorities, national authorities discussions, we see a great deal of adoption of the NIST framework directly or indirectly. So directly when it is, outright written or said that it inspires from the NIST. Indirectly, when you see some sister or brother frameworks appearing that inspire or that sometimes copy some of the functions, etc. So this is one. On the other side, as I also cover the customer and supplier requirements at Schneider Electric, so I see the mirror impact. So we have a number of requirements that emanate from NIST or inspire from NIST, not only from NIST, but mainly from NIST, that we push to our upstream, to our suppliers. And I see the mirror of this from our customers and partners that use exactly the same framework. So in the end, it's a kind of a holistic vision. And from my perspective, not to say that ISO IEC 62443 when it comes to products are not used. They are, but mainly in the contracts piece. Whereas in the cybersecurity discussions, risk management discussions, when you have with your peers or with your, let's say, customers, it's essentially discussing about, okay, what is the overarching, let's say, framework, which for the most part is NIST de facto.
And is the utility there what Kevin was talking about before, of it kind of creating a common language and a common view to look at cybersecurity risk with those partners, or is it something different?
I think language is important. I think speaking about the same thing when you discuss, protect, detect, respond. I think this is important, and also the sub functions are very important. But one area I see is that CISOs and product security officers are becoming the so-called chief storytelling officers too. And this is more and more sought after, in the CISO community when it comes to casting people, etc., etc. It's how you tell the story internally, externally, upward, downward, right? So in that, this framework has become a tool. So it's not something that you can check in the box, I'm okay, I'm not okay, but you are able to articulate your risk in a not only a common language, but in an understandable language, to non-technical people. So in that regard, I value this a lot, and I see that my peers and colleagues value that a lot, and I do a lot of those CISO forums, etc., etc. There is not, when it comes to the cybersecurity frameworks, there is not the one meeting where I do not hear about NIST framework, to be honest.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a lovely note to finish this particular segment on, and we can invite each of the speakers to turn back on camera, and we can go into more of an open Q&A. There have been a few questions roll in whilst we've been talking. I'll start with one that came in from Dick Brooks, which is directed primarily at Schneider, but actually I think it's probably relevant for a number of organizations. So the question is, Schneider, like many companies, was impacted by the MOVEit CVE exploit. What advice would Schneider have for companies to utilize the CISA's KEV, the known exploited vulnerabilities, such as MOVEit, to avoid becoming victim of these kind of software supply chain attacks? So how can organizations leverage the KEV going forward? Okay, very good. So I was expecting that to come. So let me evaluate first the MOVEit incident. Following the hack on Progress Software Corporation on their MOVEit cloud SaaS platform, we confirmed that threat actor has exfiltrated some Schneider electric data. Upon investigation, no critical data has been exposed, and no Schneider electric systems infrastructure product was impacted. So we are not using MOVEit SaaS platform anymore, and third parties impacted by data exposure has been contacted, and authorities have been notified. Right. So we evacuate this topic, and I think we all know that authorities and law enforcement has been informed and working closely on that. Now on the non-vulnerabilities piece, which is an important piece where we need to be extremely diligent and careful, especially on our respective supply chains. And Schneider Electric is very tough with its supply chain, and we hold our supply chain, our suppliers, vendors to high standards in terms of providing patches and patching their environment when they are managing IT infrastructure on our behalf. So when it's a 0-day vulnerability, well, this is a 0-day by definition. So you need some time, etc.
but we make sure that as soon as the patch is available, it is implemented in our respective environment. And when this is not done, the consequences can be dire when it comes to relationship with Schneider Electric. Okay, so we strongly recommend our supply chain, not only our supply chain, the whole ecosystem of value chain, partners and colleagues and customers to take this seriously and patch their environment as soon as the patches are available.
And when you look at that from a governance perspective, and again, this can go to anyone on the panel, or sorry, when you look at that from a framework perspective, does that supply chain aspect sit within governance? Does it sit within protect? Is it kind of distributed amongst different aspects of the core?
It's pervasive for me. It's pervasive, and I'll pass the micro to somebody else on the call. For me, it's pervasive supply chain. You cannot affect it to one function. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have it. You have it in identify. You have it in protect. You have it in response, because your supply chain is part of response as well. Recover, and more it is becoming in the govern as well. If I take it solely from an organizational perspective, it's sitting with me at Schneider, from a governance perspective. Mm-hmm. But from a protection and response perspective, it's sitting with cyber defense teams. So mm-hmm. that'll be my take on that.
That's an excellent question of kind of where supply chain, and actually I prefer to think of it as third-party risk rather than specifically supply chain. Obviously, supply chain brings with it some specific risks of itself, but the broader envelope is, I think of it as third-party, because you're not necessarily always, you're open to risks with all your connections, not just those that are providing some sort of supply element to your business. We at those that follow the it sounds like some kind of cult. We at CRI that follow the profile, as some of you may know, the profile has its own function for third party. We've called it, now we've changed it to extend. Mansour's point of these supply chain functions do kind of sprinkle and find themselves associated with governance, with protect, with identify, with recovery and response is absolutely correct. In fact, dealing with third party is almost a framework it's made smaller, right? Just kind of refocus. Take all the things of the framework and kind of, not necessarily all of them, but most of the things from the framework, and just kind of focus them outward rather than focus them inward, is kind of the way we see it. We at CRI were very supportive of not just a function for governance, but also another function for third party resilience, in a way because most organizations have a third party risk management function, or if they don't have it, they probably should, even if it's just another duty for a particular individual. And sprinkling that element of those controls throughout the profile makes it very difficult for someone to have to kind of parse through the entire profile to figure out which ones that are actually applicable to third-party risk management, to supply chain risk management. And so creating a different function where they all sit and they're all identified and they're all, playing happily together in the sandbox, makes it just a little bit easier for to take the profile, or take the framework, kind of break off a piece and give it to your third-party risk management folks and say, here, these are the things that you need to work on. Don't worry about any of the other things, just work on this. Again, that can be a little bit reductive and probably not always going to be the case, but it kind of takes that element of analysis that needs to go through. Well, does this apply to third party? Does this not apply to third party? Does this apply to my supply chain or not? But at the same time, and I'm arguing against myself here, having that human analysis of looking at what the responsibilities are within the framework itself and saying, does this apply to me? Does this apply to my third party? Does this apply to my supply chain? The answer may be yes to all three of those questions. And so it's important to make sure that there is it's not just checking boxes and going, okay, I'm responsible for 1 through 3, and that's it. It's because, again, that's what the framework is designed for. It's designed to prompt you to think about what makes a good cybersecurity program, not defining what it is.
Salvatore D'Agostino asks, many of the control sets in the framework are focused on data protection. They do very little in terms of personal data control and enabling of operational privacy requirements. Amy, I see you had an answer in there that links over to the privacy framework. So I wonder if you could answer that and welcome others as well, talking about some of that interlinkage between the NIST privacy framework and the NIST cybersecurity framework.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And also really appreciate those questions. Sorry for my slowness in trying to keep up, but I mentioned just very briefly in the presentation earlier that in addition to our cybersecurity framework, we did develop a privacy framework, also working closely with stakeholders as we had been increasingly seeing that need to look closely at the interplay between cybersecurity and privacy, and how our cybersecurity framework really is helping to address managing risk to the confidentiality and integrity and availability of information, but trying to look more from that privacy perspective and how situations may occur where something hasn't happened to a device or it's not malfunctioning or there's no breach, but just information or personal data that it contains could be used in a way that would constitute a privacy risk or cause harm to an organization's reputation or lose, for instance, stakeholders. So that's why we developed this and that similar structure with functions, and once we're now, you'll even see how a governance is carried over to the cybersecurity framework, but trying to see how we can have that different type of framework that's still complementary or can be used with the cybersecurity framework. But that had just come out in January of 2020, so still relatively new or not around as long as the cybersecurity one. So we're still really very much looking to see how we can better integrate these frameworks and continue looking at that relationship between cybersecurity and privacy and situations that occur from the misuse or unauthorized handling of data. So, apologies for not being the expert in this area, but it is the place where we're continuing to look at and get feedback, even in this 2.0 process. If there's ways we should be better calling out or incorporating these privacy or data protection elements into the new version, making it easier to use with the privacy framework or other tools for protecting data, we're definitely open to that. So thank you for those questions, and that's something we'll continue looking at. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'll put in a plug as well for my colleague, Jamie Danker at Venable, who's doing some really great work with organizations on leveraging that privacy framework and sort of fitting it to a particular organization's context. A final question from the chat. The 853 catalog should be mentioned and understood in line with the framework. The challenge amongst early adopters is 853 is overwhelming, complying with 2000 security controls. So I wonder if folks can speak to the kind of interconnection and how the framework can, I guess, be an entry into the use of other standards.
Well, not to dominate the conversation, but to be honest with you, it's a great example of how the framework is designed to kind of ease that entry into the various international standards, control standards. It gives a division of labor. It allows people to, or organizations, I should say, to focus on what they need to focus on by kind of giving it logical separations rather than control families, which are useful, but not necessarily when you're developing a program from the ground up. And it is from, again, when you take the framework and then add on a connective element to sector regulation, if that's the sector you're in, can give even more direction as to the controls that your regulators or government stakeholders are interested in. So it's just kind of, it starts to winnow down into those things that really start to matter. but it is just a prioritization. It's not to say everything else doesn't matter. It's a prioritization on how an organization should think about this stuff. And yeah, 800-53 is overwhelming. ISO 27001 is overwhelming. Keep going. And they're all. This is a tough area, and it's constantly changing. So anything that can help with that prioritization, I think, is valuable. And I applaud NIST. I applaud NIST in its interaction with its international stakeholders to make this a usable tool beyond 800-53, right? Beyond U.S. federal government requirements, and trying to make this truly a global tool for prioritization and improvement.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a nice note for us to finish on there. I just want to, as we close out, say a big thank you to our speakers, Kevin, Martin, Amy, Per, Mansoor, and Kevin Stein as well. I think it's been a really enlightening discussion. As we mentioned before, there is a public consultation open around the framework, which closes, I believe, November 4th. There's also another stakeholder workshop taking place a week from today, for which you can register virtually if you want to participate in that. You'll hear a whole host of other perspectives. And, ultimately, to draw some points out of the discussion, the framework itself is not the be-all and end-all of managing cyber risk, but it's an important tool. It's an important common language, and in order for it to have value, it has to be up to date and be a useful tool for organizations. So really do encourage folks to weigh in with ideas for how that can be improved. With that said, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you very much.